Welcome to Supply Chain Now, the voice of global supply chain. Supply Chain Now focuses on the best in the business for our worldwide audience, the people, the technologies, the best practices, and today's critical issues, the challenges and opportunities. Stay tuned to hear from those making global business happen right here on Supply Chain Now.
Hey, good morning. Scott Luton and Jenny Froome with you here on Supply Chain Now. Welcome to today's show. Jenny, how are we doing?
Hi, we're doing really well. Happy New Year to everybody.
Happy New Year to you as well. I've enjoyed tracking your exploits here through the end of 2021 with family and beyond. I know we're all excited about a better year for all in 2022. So on today's episode, Jenny, one of the things we've really enjoyed doing is working with you and the SAPICS team on this Supply Chain Leadership Across Africa series. Had some home run guests, and we're going to continue that today, aren't we, Jenny?
Starting the year off with one of my favorites.
Wonderful. And hey, if it's one of Jenny Froome's favorites, you know we can't go wrong. So quick reminder, Jenny Froome serves as COO of SAPICS, which is doing wonderful work from a professional development and networking standpoint. So check them out at SAPICS, SAPICS.org. Okay, so speaking of one of Jenny Froome's favorites, try to say that 3 times fast, Jenny Froome's favorites. We have an incredible guest joining us today. Join me in welcoming Azuka Okeke, CEO of the Africa Resource Center for Excellence in Supply Chain Management. Azuka, how are we doing?
I'm doing great, Scott. Thank you for having me on the show. And thank you, Jenny. You're one of my favorites too.
that is what a compliment to start the show off with. Azuka, we've been tracking you a little bit. You know, I know we got with Jenny and of course your ears have been burning. We're all big fans of the work that you're doing and really excited to share a little bit of that here today on Supply Chain Now. But before we do that, let's get to know Azuka a little bit better from a human standpoint. So tell us, Azuka, where did you grow up, and give us the goods on your upbringing a little bit.
Okay. Well, I grew up in Nigeria. I'm from Nigeria. I'm from the eastern part of Nigeria. They call us the Igbo, a tribe in the southeastern part of Nigeria. I was born in one of the cities there, and all my nursery, primary, secondary, university in one state. So wow. And I got married in that state. So after a while, I said to myself, I think I've expired in this state. So I kind of like moved, but all my growing and settling in, as a mother and all was in one state in Nigeria before I left and moved and started hovering around the whole city in Nigeria.
Right. Yeah. Well, so before, because I want to find out where you live today, but growing up in that one city, that one state, whether it's food, whether it's stuff you did outside of school, what was something you really identify with as part of your childhood or upbringing?
I think the city I grew up in, it's called Enugu. It's on a hill and it's quite hilly. So one of the things I enjoyed, during that period was I used to take long walks. I never liked transportation. I would walk from like hours. Everywhere you ask me to go, I would rather walk than enter transport system. So because all along the road, you see trees, you will be climbing up, going down. So it was always fun. So it's something that I miss now where I stay in because I do like taking long walks and I grew up doing that. Yeah.
I love it. That just hearing you share that helps my mental state of mind, Jenny. I don't know about you. So one final question, and then Jenny, I might ask both of y'all about this traveling question, but one final question. Azuka, where do you live now? What's home now?
I'm in Lagos, the mother city in Nigeria. So you can understand it's from census, it says we have 23 million people living in this small city, very small mass. It's highly populated, but it's the energy space in Nigeria. If you're in Lagos, we never sleep. So 24 hours of busy, busy, busy. So it's a far run from where I grew up, but it's where it's happening in Nigeria, though.
Evidently. Now,
Yeah.
did my ears fail me, or did you say 23 million people?
Yes.
Wow. Okay. So we've got plenty of good stuff to talk about when it comes to supply chains and with that kind of vibrant community. All right. So one final question before I pass the baton to my dear friend, Jenny Froome. I have heard our scout team has been tracking you, and we hear that you're, prior to these crazy times now, you traveled all the time, traveled a lot. So, Azuka, what's been one, it's tough to always pick a favorite, but what's one of your favorite places to visit? And maybe you'll get back out once we get through the pandemic. What's one of your favorite places to visit and why? I
visited one city one time in the Netherlands. It's called Volendam. It's so beautiful because it's kind of like a village. It's not a city. And because I do take walks, anywhere I go, I always look for the track to walk. All through the road, you see beautiful flowers. You see the dams and the farmyard. And it's just one of the most beautiful places I've ever visited. So for me, Volendam, yes, is one of my most favorite.
Wonderful. Now, you know that you're going to have to send us some pictures when you get back out and you're taking these beautiful walks. Otherwise, it didn't happen, as I hear my kids tell me. So thanks for sharing, Azuka. Jenny, I want to pose the same question to you, and then we can move right into kind of learning more about her professional journey. But Jenny, what's one of your favorite places to visit?
Oh my gosh, that's such a humongous question. By the time I was 11, I'd lived in 7 different countries. So I've been very lucky to live and visit so many different countries. Right at the moment, I have a real yearning to go to Thailand. I think it's one of the places that I enjoy and relax the most, and have met such amazing, gentle, welcoming people. But anywhere right now, anywhere I would like to travel to, I'll get on that plane and I'll be there. So Azuka and I think first met in Benin, and then we met officially properly in Chicago. So our relationship is an international one as well.
Jenny, I think before Chicago, Scott, we met in Dubai, one conference.
Oh, we met in Dubai, that's right, as well.
You came to me and you said, it doesn't matter what you say, we'll just be listening to you.
That's right. Yeah, it doesn't matter what you say, we'll just listen to Azuka, because the way in which she says it is just so passionate. You want to listen to what it is.
Well, there's quite a vibe also, just in a little bit of time we spent. I've heard about the passion that comes ahead of you, ahead of our conversation today, but the vibe and the positivity, and from what I understand, a ton of expertise. So let's get more into that. So Jenny, I think we're going to talk first about kind of what Azuka has been doing previous to now, right?
Yeah. So we obviously are going to move on to what you're doing now, but so much of what you've done previously has led you to this place where you are now. And what would you say are a couple of roles or experiences that have really shaped your worldview, but also encouraged you to get to the point that you are today?
I think that's a very deep question, because I've done so many things, and everything kind of counts and has shaped how I see things. But I think one thing that I would say along the line that has kind of shaped who I am now, based on my journey before, is the fact, I always like to tell people, the fact that in my career, I started from the very last mile. I started working at a clinic in an underserved community, and where I had to take care of my clients that were taking antiretrovirals. So those that are living with HIV and AIDS. So having to work with them and having to convince them or encourage them to keep taking their medicine, building relationships, in that small clinic. And it turned out that even before we set up a therapeutic unit, that before any patient would be put on medication, they would have to consult me because of I would say, the passion I had working with clients to make sure that they start their treatment, understanding when they stop their treatment, and having that empathy to know that, it's a difficult journey. That actually shaped even my thinking process at the very, at this leadership position. So when I'm making decisions, when I'm trying to convince the country, I'm coming from the angle that I know these clients, I know the people we're talking about. I have an understanding of even their family issues and how challenging it is to come to pick up your medicines. So I think that really, that experience, starting from that very lower end, really has helped all through my journey to this point.
And presumably also then ignited an interest in the how the medication got to the last mile, et cetera, et cetera. So therein the segue right into what it is that the Africa Resource Center for Supply Chain Excellence in Nigeria is actually all about. Yes. And obviously I've watched this progression, and I've watched you as a leader. And the series is all about leaders in Africa, and for me you are an epitome of that, because of your desire to see people succeed and people be educated, and the professionalization of supply chain management. All of that you believe in is coming through loud and clear through the organization. So in your role as CEO, where do you find currently you're kind of spending most of your time, and how are you guiding all these initiatives forward?
If you ask me, before I even became a CEO, my primary goal was to educate the nation. When I got into the leadership position, in ARC, when I was told to come and help the ARC, because before then my focus was public-private collaboration in all areas of health. That was what I was doing, but they told me, oh, come and do this for ARC but it's speaking to supply chain. And what I said the first time, because I had done supply chain along the line in our own way, I said, oh, supply chain is boring.
Azuka, hey, really quick, when you say the ARC, are you talking about the Africa Resource Center? Is that right?
Yes.
Just to connect with folks. Okay, I got you.
Yes.
So
the Africa Resource Center, because the ARC is an initiative that was set up across multiple countries. So I was told to come and help set up the one in Nigeria. And I said, oh, what's this ARC? And they said, oh, it has to do with supply chain. We just want you to bring in your expertise in public-private partnerships, to supply chain. I said, oh, supply chain is boring. I've done it before, But then, but when coming to the ARC, trying to answer Jenny's question, I realized, okay, let's get into this supply chain business with government and how we facilitate the relationships. And I realized that in Africa, and even more so in Nigeria, where we thought we had people that had the background in supply chain, understood supply chain to make the decision, because it is what you understand that you can then make an informed decision. It was clear that we had a lot of people in government that didn't even know the difference between logistics and supply chain, and they were in places of leadership. So it was then obvious that we were seeing the problems, not because people were not willing to, make the right decisions, just that people didn't really know what decisions to make. So one of the things I did was really to make, I always call it, make a lot of noise, that we need to build internal capacity. We need to bring in resources to do that. And I'm happy that that really engendered a lot of, investments. Now, where I sit, my focus, because good thing, SAPICS is here, ASCM, a lot of folks are in the continent and really trying to strengthen, we have the Kaizen Institute, so many people, Kune Foundation. So I think we've laid the foundation, and then it's now for more investments to strengthen education and research. My focus now as CEO really is now to redirect the government in Nigeria to now start investing in local manufacturing. For me, local manufacturing of pharmaceuticals, of medicines is now the key public health issue because of what we saw with COVID pandemic and in the continent. We were not looking at it before, we were only looking at distribution, but now that is what I'm looking at now. How do we actually have these medicines available in the continent? Yeah.
Yeah, it was a presentation that you did last year, well, 2 years ago now, where you mentioned the appalling percentage of pharmaceuticals that are actually manufactured on the continent. I think it was 3%. I can't remember if it was even that high, but that was a real eye-opener for me. And I just think that how many of us don't understand the lack of local manufacturing, and I think that this work that you're setting out to do is of huge importance. And again, it goes back to that whole thing about how 90% of what we do or did do before the silver lining that COVID brought was that educating people about what supply chain management actually is. And now we don't need to do that. We can actually launch into a conversation and use supply chain management without people glazing over because they understand the importance of it. So,
Yes.
we look for small positives these days, but that's actually one of them.
That's right.
So
really quick, Jenny,
sorry, go,
if I can. Yeah. I know you're about to ask her Eureka moment, but 2 quick things. First off, I love that make a lot of noise, a mantra that you mentioned. I love that. I'm gonna blatantly steal that. We've got our episode title now, Make a Lot of Noise with Azuka Okeke. But secondly, I love how supply chain is boring. That's one of our podcasts here. That's we've heard that phrase a lot. And I think we all long for the days a few years back where supply chains truly were boring, right? Because there wasn't quite as many curveballs as there are now. But nevertheless, the silver lining is we're going to be better as an industry based on the challenges and how we've had to overcome, continuing how to overcome and innovate, and do things better and stronger. And what I love, what I heard you say, Azuka, is identify these long held, these ecosystem challenges and address that. So bring manufacturing production to the continent to gain some more things within our control, which is really important. So much there, but I really appreciate what you shared. Okay, so Jenny, now that I've joined the Azuka Okeke fan club along with you officially, we're talking Eureka moments, right?
I don't charge much, I promise. So it's, exactly. So in everything that you've done, and from the sort of, from where you've started to where you are now, and in your current role and with the current trajectory of the Center of Excellence, then what's been a real Eureka moment for you? Something that has really stood out for you and made you think?
I think 2 things, not necessarily one. But the first one, like I mentioned earlier, when we started this journey, my goal was to get the leaders in Nigeria and also across Africa to even understand that you guys are not supply. They will say we're supply chain experts. You'll be having meetings in Nigeria and they'll tell you, oh, we're going to export supply chain talent across Africa. I'm like, what? Do you know what supply chain management is? And, having to, being cautious of, I was initially rejected. A lot of agencies, they didn't want to do anything with ArcESN because I was pushing this mandate. I was saying, we need to get the right certifications. We need to get the right education. We need to have universities begin to teach people and give you proper degrees. And many agencies didn't want to hear that. They pushed me out of their meetings. So I remember one Eureka moment was when I was able to convince BMGF. And this is true, Jennifer, it's not because of you. I was able to convince BMGF. I said, okay, Tom, you need to get some of these leaders to SAPICS conference in South Africa. Why? Because I had attended the APICS conference in Chicago, and I said to myself, wow, there is a huge difference. We don't do supply chain in Nigeria. So Tom agreed, and ASCM brought some folks, and they attended the conference. When they got back to Nigeria, I was just entering my office and I received a call, and it was pharmacist Linus, and he said to me, I want to say something to you. I said, okay, go ahead, sir. He said, you know, I used to say we knew supply chain. I said, yes. I said, I attended this conference and I want to say thank you. I said, okay. He said, now I know I don't know anything supply. He said, now I know. After years of calling himself a supply chain expert, he says, now I know I don't know supply chain. Yeah. For me, I was like, yes, we're getting somewhere. So that one, it was good. The second one is coming into, I was really getting into it, working so hard in the country and doing the right things and writing the right report, sending it. I remember, I don't know if you know Prashant Yadav. I had a meeting with Prashant, and it was he had invited me to come for a course in Harvard. So we're having just sitting out and talking. And I think we were talking, and then after talking, he said, I said, what do you mean by my voice? He said, whatever you're doing, nobody knows it. You are doing a great job, but you've got to find a way to communicate that. It was a strange thing, but then I went back and I started looking, well, how do I find my voice? And that was how the noise began. It wasn't meant to be noise. It was meant to say, well, this is what the country is doing, and I'll put it out there in Twitter. I'll put it out there in LinkedIn. You know what was the Eureka moment? People tried to shut me down. They said, oh, no. Why are you talking? Stop posting. You're trying to, I'm like, no, say the good things happening. It's not always about the challenges. Any milestone, bring it out there. So for me is the fact that I needed that statement, find your voice, was an aha moment. What does that mean? Yes.
I love that. You know, there are so many challenges in this day and age. There's always been challenges in supply chain, right? There just hasn't had as much attention as it has now. But to your point, Azuka, if we sit back and we talk about how big that problem is, and gosh, what are we going to do? Nothing will ever get done. So I love your key point there on your second Eureka moment. So we've got to move right along. I want to ask really quick, because I want to get to your thoughts and you and Jenny thoughts on the supply chain ecosystem in Nigeria. But as you established, and as we've done our homework on you, you've got a lot of expertise in creating very successful private sector, public sector collaborations, right? And there seems to be a lot of big wins already there in those types of collaborations, but also a lot more opportunity. So speak to that a bit. Why are you really passionate about those types of collaborations, and what kind of opportunity are you seeing there moving forward?
Thank you very much. The whole idea of having a resource center was basically to, in the same ecosystem, you will see where government or the public sector is having challenges, maybe around distribution, but that same ecosystem, you see private sector thriving. So it was something that was always the drive, is how do we leverage the strength? How do we bring in private sector for government to leverage and all that? But in that journey, it wasn't as simple as bring a company, go to Johnson & Johnson and ask them for their expert to come teach government. That has never worked, really. One of the things that we realized was the ecosystem has to exist, whereby you look at the supply chain systems in Africa, they are at what we would call highly immature, meaning that from the beginning of the plan to the end of the plan, you will need different private sector resources, even to the point of writing a proposal, because of the limitations in expertise and experience within the private sector or within the public sector. So we looked at it from that angle and said, okay, this is a huge problem, but it is not something we can solve. One thing we need to do is not just to think of companies that will come and solve one problem, because solving one problem will not give us the outcome we're trying to address. It's having a platform or platform structure where you have multiple companies coexist, you prepare them and you get them ready, so that at any point that there is a need, the response time of collaboration is shortened. That is the part of it. Because remember that you are dealing with two institutions. If a government says, I need private sector resources, you've got to go to the private sector institution, and it takes time. You will spend a lot of time writing concept notes, engaging the government. By the time you address that demand, that's like 7 months, and the government says, oh, we've done. That's the reality. So one of the things you need to look at, one of the things that it's not that people are not doing PPP. It's how do we make public-private sector collaborations in supply chain responsive, because once there's a demand, you need to address it, or else we're going to have issues down the line. So what we've thought of is setting up structured platforms, have companies, and that's where the opportunity lies. Companies and multiple companies, because supply chain problems does not necessarily need a supply chain solution.
All right. Say that a little bit louder for those in the back. That's a really great point there. Say it again.
Supply chain problems doesn't necessarily need a supply chain solution. So if you want to solve a supply chain problem, you've got to have a whole gamut of solutions. If you have a solution that addresses one thing, you may not solve the end goal. That's just as mad as it is. So we have these platforms where we have companies that register, and we not just register and keep them, we educate them in how to work with government, prepare them, because that's very key. So that once there is a demand, our hope is to have a response time of collaboration of 1 week.
Wow.
And we've been achieving that. In some instances, we get a day collaboration and we sign a contract.
Okay. So there's so much more there. I really appreciate you shedding light on that. Government must exist. Of course, the public sector must exist, the private sector. And there's so much that you're kind of alluding to, that not just government and public sector can learn from the private sector, but the sharing that each of those areas can learn from each other to get stuff done, and to get stuff done in a timely manner, right? And that's perhaps one of the biggest, man, when you can really orchestrate that and get stuff done and move timeframes from 7 months to a week, 7 days, you've really done stuff, move mountains. So we'll have to have you back, Azuka, to talk more about the art of that orchestration. But Jenny, for now, since we are talking about supply chain now, and zeroing in on this brilliant thought leader here that just so happens to be very active in Nigeria, what are we looking to learn from Azuka next?
Yeah, so Azuka, obviously, for those people who haven't been to Nigeria, it's very hard to understand the constraints, perhaps, and the challenges that exist. So from your perspective regarding the supply chain ecosystem in Nigeria, you've already alluded to the vast number of people that live in the country. What are the other challenges that come to mind that you can share with us all?
I think the greatest challenges we face in Nigeria is I'll say the structural challenges. The structures are not, they don't exist literally in most areas. So, and then it's quite a painful reality because of the amount investments made in Nigeria. And that's just one of the major things that we've seen. And in donor investments, the agreement has always been that donors would invest maybe in the commodities and also in providing technical assistance. The government, they were to put in the structures. They were to put in the right people, provide the right people that will be trained and have the infrastructure to, to take it in, institutionalize solutions. Unfortunately, that part that the government was meant to do hasn't been done quite well. Not for the fact that, like I said, that it's not for the fact that they didn't want to do that. It's that we didn't really spend time with the donor investments to really find out the best way to do this and make sure there's proper buy-in. So for us, the major challenge now is how do you get everybody to say, stop? Let's stop putting in investments that won't really, I'll say that next year you won't see what the investment has addressed. You know, we need to slow it down and begin a journey. I call it the journey to sustainability. It is not going to happen overnight because infrastructure, they are required. The right human resource structure is required. Having to tell the donors to hold off a bit, slow down a bit, don't be so quick to put down money. And having to tell the government, well, if you want the money, you've got to put down the structure. For me, that is the major, the routes or the route, let me use the right frame, that we all need to take. That's the major challenge. It's not for the sake that we don't have donor money. If they keep coming, it's going to be down the drain. That's really the reality. And for people like me that make a lot of noise, I have been making that noise. I said, stop putting money in this system. Don't come blaming the country. Don't put anything in the media that says $24 million invested in Nigeria, then you don't know. No way you're not going to do that. So hold on, wait for direction, wait for the right policies in place, strategies in place, work plans. Let's go back to business principles that private sector have used. Use those and then begin to look at co-investments, not full investments, states that are willing to put cash on the table. I like to say cash because it's money on the table, then we start talking. So for me, yes, that's where we're going.
All right. So Jenny.
And you're not going to argue with that, are you, Scott?
No way.
No. But I am going to pick on just one of the things that she shared earlier in that answer is the power of the timeout. Right. We all get into the blocking and tackling and the firefighting and the day in and day out, but that's very powerful and simple gesture to keep in mind. Sometimes you got to say, okay, everybody stop what you're doing. Right. You hear that phrase, flying the jet while we're building the jet. And we do some of that. You got to do some of that sometimes. But to your point, Azuka, if you don't, folks, and those donors you're speaking to are making these big investments and it's not set up to win, those investments won't keep coming. And then the growth and the success, innovation, and moving everything forward is not sustainable, right? So I love how you think that power of the timeout is such a great Eureka moment I'm pulling away from this conversation, one of many. Okay, so you've spoken a little bit, and Jenny, I'm gonna give you a chance based on what she shared there. What sticks out to you before I move forward and ask her more broadly?
Yeah, it goes back to that whole basis of accountability, doesn't it? I mean, it's like you can be given as much as you think you need, but until you're accountable for how you spend it or what you do with it, it's never going to be an effective solution. Yeah,
well said. And a lot fewer words than you always do that, Jenny. You can pick those 7 great words. You don't need 8, just use 7. I love that. All right. So Azuka, really have enjoyed what you've shared already. We're going to have you back so we can expound more on some of this stuff. So when you look at the broader global supply chain, these are, despite all the challenges and there's been no shortage, it still has been an exceptional time to be in global supply chain, right? So in your words and from where you sit, what's a couple of things that are really front and center when it comes to topics in global supply chain in your mind?
Well, I think global supply chain is now one of the key things we're beginning to appreciate is the role of thought leadership. I think it's becoming more significant, people that can look at things from that broad perspective and begin to look at, how they address it in context. So I think those are some of the wins, despite the challenges of COVID. We now see the need to listen to one another to say, well, what's happening in India? What's going on over there in the US? And I think for me is also the fact that the pandemic has made us look at things globally more, unlike before. It was more like, this is an Africa problem, this is an Asia. We have funding coming from one direction. Now, I'm interested in knowing how US is solving their COVID immunization. What are the patterns? What are the challenges? So for me, is right now where I think it's the learning, the opportunity to learn across continents, nations. We're all struggling with the same thing, and the variants and the COVID, they think they're smart, but I think they are making us smarter. It's sad, but then it's the reality. We're having smarter people, we're having people looking at things more broadly, and we are coming to communities like this to share our thoughts. So for me, is thought leadership and opportunity to learn globally is really what's coming up forefront for me.
Jenny, your response to that?
Yeah, it's the human relationships. I think it's that human contact that people are realizing that, before it was all about your digitization and your technology, etc. But if you don't have the fundamental human input and elements and the collaboration, then it's a bit of a lost cause. And I think that that's something that's definitely come more and more and more to the fore.
I agree with you. I agree with both of you. There has been, we have to harp on it all the time, because when you're going through tough stretches, this has been a really tough stretch for all of us globally, to your point, Azuka. Sometimes you got to kind of focus on the gains you're still making, right? You got the innovation. When I see workforce safety, which really has come in meaningful ways to the forefront. Workforce flexibility, the voice of the employee. These trends really were amplified in the last couple of years. I look at how supply chains are looking at some of the problems that were secondary forever. Or at least for a long time, that now they're front and center. Their priorities 1A, B, and C, and it's changing. It's not just changing the industry, but it's changing and presenting new opportunities for folks globally, right? And on different levels. So I'm optimistic, and it sounds like y'all are optimistic as well. When we get through the end of this stretch, and we can at least say, not that COVID's going away, at least say the pandemic is over, right? I'm not a doctor, but I think we can get there. We're going to learn so much for generations to come from what we've been through these last few years. And that's a really good thing. And by the way, as we all can agree, the supply chain practitioner and the visibility of that profession and the opportunities and to some degree, the prestige of that's a great thing for bringing lots of talent everywhere into the industry. So whether it's in Africa, North America, you name it, that's great for everybody. Okay. So
I was just going to add one thing
please.
that Greg White mentioned in an interview we did eons ago at the beginning of all of this. And he said he hopes that the supply chain practitioner who's been shouting for that seat at the table is ready for the seat at the table. And I think that, that's something else that, okay, so now we've got the attention on the profession, now what? And that's the critical point that I think maybe we've gone past the main point and everyone's really thinking about it. But I think that, to your point, Scott, goes back to that opportunity. There is so much opportunity that's out there.
Agreed. To that point, so Azuka, I'd love to get your final thoughts before we make sure folks can know how to connect with you and the Africa Resource Center for Excellence in Supply Chain Management. So Azuka, as we talk about, what you shared there and kind of moving forward, good and bad, what's your final thought in terms of the year that lays in front of us here?
I think it's going to be an amazing 2022 for us in Nigeria. We have, I call it more responsive and responsible government that are now beginning to adopt, business practices in strengthening supply chains, particularly within the public health sector. What that means is that as we have more states in Nigeria come up with clear work plans and budgets, we then need to have the private sector in place. And just like what Jenny said, her last statement is, the challenge we have is, do we then have enough adequate prepared private sector to, begin to collaborate? That is our greatest challenge right now. It's no longer the government. The government now understand what to do and they are going about it. Where are the local companies? Where are the global companies that have local footprints? We want to see more of them work with us or be in our platform. So for us, for the year to be a success, we really hope to have more private sector companies, academia, institutions that provide education that are ready to work with our government. So for me, looking forward to more of that. Yeah.
I love that. Okay. And it needs, it needs great thought leaders that are rooted in a bias for action, not just lip service. And between Azuka and Jenny and your respective organizations, that's what it takes. So I really admire y'all's your action focused leadership in that regard. Okay. So to that end, Azuka Okeke, CEO of the Africa Resource Center for Excellence in Supply Chain Management, how can folks connect with you and learn more about your organization?
Excellent. I'm always open to connecting with people. One is, I'm on LinkedIn, Azuka Okeke, and I'm very visible. So please, folks can connect with me directly via my LinkedIn, Azuka Okeke. Just go Azuka Okeke, you see me. And then also, Jenny has all my contact details. So I would also want people to reach out to Jenny. She knows how to, I never say no to Jenny. I'm yet to get to the point of Jenny. So anyone, and of course, I'm always willing to be in platforms where I can educate people about what we do, because we do want to use our time well this year, in educating folks. So if there are platforms where we can talk about our work and where we are, definitely I'm interested. So if there's a company that want to have like a mini presentation or something like that, I'm always willing. So I think I'm easy to connect with. Thank you.
I love that, Azuka. And it's good to be easy to connect with. And that's how we help to create those free flow ideas and new practices, not necessarily best practices, because to what y'all both are speaking to, we got to have a lot of new practices, maybe new non-supply chain practices. Who knows? All right. So Jenny, let's make sure how folks know how to connect with you and SAPICS.
Yeah, thank you. We're also on LinkedIn. We've got the SAPICS company page. That's SAPICS. And I'm also active on LinkedIn and also Twitter. I love my Twitter. I know some people don't, but I enjoy it. I think it's my attention span. It appeals to best of all. But Jenny Froome, and you'll find me. Wonderful.
And yes, you've got to connect with Jenny, all those places, but especially Twitter. She is a great Twitter follow. Okay. So big thanks to Azuka Okeke with the Africa Resource Center for Excellence in Supply Chain Management. Thank you so much, Azuka.
Thank you very much, Scott. And thank you very much, Jenny.
You bet.
Always.
But don't go away just yet, because we're going to talk about you as if you're not still in the Zoom room with us. Jenny, we've got just an extra minute or two before we wrap here today. Azuka shared a lot in roughly 50 minutes, right? And I feel like I'm ready to run through the wall behind me based on a lot of what she shared. She's very, very inspiring. What was your favorite part from what she shared here today?
So much. And as always, it's always like you feel like you've been passed by a whirlwind whenever you've had the privilege of listening to all the ideas, and not just ideas. Azuka is one of those people who does actually do the doing as well, and really is an example to all of us of how don't just talk, actually do, and also make the noise. So I think the making the noise, there's making a noise and there's making a constructive noise. And I think that you've got that down to a T. And also I love that comment about the clever variants and us becoming cleverer. And really from her word, from her lips to whoever's listening, please may that be so.
Agreed. That was it's really brilliant. To hear that and that positive spin oh gosh, all these variants that have come after us.
Oh no,
but
there's a new one.
There's an,
But anyway,
it seems like every week there's a
Every
new
week.
release. It's like
and
technology.
it must just go away now, please.
Yes, please. But I'll just add one more thing to that. There's so much there that make a lot of noise. That's a mantra folks I think can rally around. But also I think it's really important, out of all the things she shared, one of my favorites was non-supply chain solutions, because the way I perceive that, it's, as we've learned these last couple of years, but as we've been learning for longer beyond pandemic, we can't sit on the laurels of what has worked previously. We can't sit on the laurels of what has worked for different parts of the world and only for certain parts of the world. We can't sit on any of that stuff. We got to constantly look in the mirror and really question, okay, what's the ramifications? What's the repercussions? We can't sit on our hands and look at the same old tired solution. So I love that. I love that thinking. Azuka, you're a breath of fresh air. Jenny, as always, you always are. I love these conversations with you. And big thanks to Jenny Froome and SAPICS. Let's do another one again soon, next month, I guess, right, Jenny?
Yeah, that would be great.
Yeah. All right. Big thanks again, Jenny Froome with SAPICS. Big thanks, Azuka Okeke with the Africa Resource Center for Excellence in Supply Chain Management. Folks, you heard it here.
Okay.
There's so much to act on with what you heard Azuka share here today. Hopefully you enjoyed the conversation as much as I have. If you like conversations like this, find us at Supply Chain Now and subscribe so you don't miss anything. But most importantly, challenge you. Hey, be like Azuka, do good, give forward, but be the change that's needed. And on that note, we'll see you next time right back here on Supply Chain Now. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks for being a part of our Supply Chain Now community. Check out all of our programming at supplychainnow.com and make sure you subscribe to Supply Chain Now anywhere you listen to podcasts. And follow us on Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, and Instagram. See you next time on Supply Chain Now.